Okay, welcome back, fight fans, to my breakdown of the first UFC fight card of 2023. Oh, my balls are tingling on this one. If you are someone who only tunes in exclusively for UFC cards, then God, it's been a long month since you've seen any MMA action. Um, if you aren't, then you had a decent Ryzen and Bellator card in between the weight, and you might have had a few regional promotions to keep you entertained. Now, I'm the kind of guy that would tune in to watch two bin men scrap behind a Tesco car park. But honestly, even for me, it's been a long month as a fan of the sport without the big show in town. Now, for this one, if you are somebody who doesn't normally watch cards from top to bottom, this one will be filled with very few recognizable names for you on here. However, there really are some potentially cracking matchups as I'm about to get into. Now, before getting started, just a few disclaimers. Firstly, there will be a few fights on the card missing in terms of the breakdown. I will throw in a few extra mentions at the very end. But I'm only really going to lay my detailed opinion down on fighters that I've seen more than once. Secondly, if you're the kind of person that likes to stick on a pound note or two, I will be making a prediction for the rest of these fights. However, there will be a few I might advise you to pass on that I deem far too risky for one reason or another. Um, Finally, to finish off the video, I'll add one short and one long sort of parlay suggestion to cover both the pussies like who prefer a safe option and those that like to go for some juicy underdog plays. So, with that being said, let's get into it. Okay, so the first fight on the card that I'm going to break down is a bantamweight matchup between Javid Basharat and Mateus Mendonca. Now, Basharat, who made a recent move to Extreme Couture, which is a really good move for him, by the way. He's technically 3 fights into his UFC career, with one of those coming on the Contender Series. Now, his first two notable fights in the UFC at first glance can be seen as a little bit underwhelming, especially for those of you that put a lot of stock into finishes. I will say, however, that being flung in the deep end with Trevin Jones and Tony Gravely are a big indication to me of how much faith his team has in him and how high the UFC are on him. Um, that is two really tough contenders to start your career on. And despite not finishing, he was able to impose his will in both these fights, and this is extremely impressive to me. Um, so his bread and butter are his ability to impose strong offensive grappling and to find a submission or ground and pound to finish a fight. I will say that his stand-up skills are also no joke, and this is aided by the fact he appears to be very long and quite big in there for a bantamweight. In his last fight against Gravely, who I think is a really tough contender, seasoned, Javid did really well to mix up the strikes in particular. He kept finding the body and kept him guessing. He also showed a really great gas tank and a willingness to target different areas. He's also got a massive fucking head and has shown that he's more than capable of taking a strike. So, yeah, there's a lot going for him. And now Mendonca, he's fighting out of Chute Box in Brazil, which is a really accomplished gym. He's shown a really crazy variety of skills and finishes in the cage. With this being his first major fight in the promotion outside of his Contender Series appearance, there's a little bit of, that's something to be wary of. Interestingly, if the fight metrics are to be believed, despite how big Javid is, Mendonca apparently he's 3 inches shorter than his opponent, but he'll walk in with a 2-inch reach advantage. Um, and he has demonstrated a variety of ways to end the fight and should provide a really stern test here, despite being 4 years younger and, by comparison to Javid, relatively inexperienced. Um, his Contender Series bout against Ejim was over in devastatingly quick fashion. So this really does demonstrate how dangerous the guy is. Now, the odds on this one are pretty broad, with Basharat coming in at almost a 4-1 favorite in most booking lines. And this seems a little bit broad to me, despite the level that despite the level of competition that each respective man has faced in their career thus far. The main issue I have is that Mendonca has mostly had first round finishes, against, relative tomato cans. And this makes him kind of an unknown entity to me. We haven't really seen him against good competition, nor have we seen how potentially good his gas tank can be over 3 rounds. At those betting lines, there's very little value, however, in placing Basharat, as you'll basically have to go in big to make any kind of gains, especially if you're going to take a money line. And personally, I think it's far too risky at 4-1. I believe that Mendonca will try to finish the fight early. I think he'll fail to do so, and he'll get dragged into the later stages of the fight. I think he's going to take body shots that are going to wear him down, and he's going to find that he's come up against a level of competition that he's never really experienced. So I'm going to pick Javid to win by, I'm going to go with either late third round submission or by a clear unanimous decision. With the with a bet on the latter for me being the play to take. It's a dangerous fight for Basharat though, as I said, with the unknown element, but I expect him to come through. Okay, now the next fight, we're still on the prelims. We've got a matchup between Mateusz Rebecki and Nick Fior. Now, based on experience here, this one looks like a total mismatch. This will be contested at lightweight, with Rebecki the sizable favorite here. Now, while Rebecki's last fight was won by rear naked choke, he tends to predominantly get it done by being explosive and aiming to take off your fucking head. And to be fair, it seems to be working for him so far in his career. Rebecki is considerably shorter according to the fight metrics, with a reasonable reach disadvantage over his opponent. But for me, the most glaring standout here is the level of competition they've both faced. Rebecki has had a career fighting against fighters with sizable winning records in a region of Poland that is producing increasingly dangerous fighters. And that counts for me. That means something to me. Opposed to Fior, who beat up Strangle, who was 5-19, and a guy called JLS who had a 15-98 record, and that wasn't that long ago. So this definitely stinks of padding and tomato can crushing to me, and a lack of faith in you by your management team. I'm not going to go too deep into this one, as I feel pretty confident that Rebecki knocks this guy out in the first round. However, again, at odds of 8-1 in most betting lines to win, and only, half money to get it done in the first round, it probably isn't worth taking straight up. It might be worth sticking Rebecki on a parlay to win by TKO or submission. But personally, the odds make this one a tricky one to play, and I will probably be ignoring it just on that basis. Unless you fancy the fight to go under 1.5 rounds, which I think is the play to make, because I think it's gonna be over quickly. Okay, this is another tricky one. It takes us up to middleweight, and this will be the main event of the prelims, assuming we don't have another fight fall out. And this is between Claudio Ribeiro and Abdul Razak Al Hassan. Now, taking a look at the metrics first, Ribeiro is 7 years younger and has a pretty decent 4-inch reach advantage. And this could be really vital in a fight where both men are more than likely going to stand in the pocket and trade fucking bombs at each other. Now, the bookies have this one as a pick'em, and for really good reason. Ribeiro's only gone past the first round twice in his professional career, and both men have demonstrated the ability to put the other person to sleep at any time, and it's usually early. Now, Al Hassan has had more 3-round fights and has notable wins against the likes of Nico Price, who was pretty good not that long ago, and Alessio De Cherico, and he knocked those guys out in devastating fashion. Those fights were quick. The issue for me is that if Al Hassan doesn't get it done in the first, he seems to gas pretty quickly and struggle. He's also shown a not so dependable chin, and with his age and tendency to make poor decisions at time in the cage, this makes me very nervous. Now, adversely, Ribeiro is coming fresh off a devastating win in the Contender Series, and he's demonstrated in his previous fight that he can go into deep waters and find enough in the tank to still pull out a finish. Now, the problem with that fight is that it was against a guy called Keller Albuquerque, and that guy had a shocking record, so I'm not sure how much stock you can put in that. If I had a gun to my head, I'd have to pick Ribeiro to maybe get a sloppy KO, but this is such a risky play, and this is going to be a common theme for this card. However, while I see a Ribeiro KO as the most likely, I think the play to make is sticking this fight in a parlay to go under 1.5 rounds. I reckon someone's getting knocked the fuck out in this one, and I would be surprised if it goes beyond a round and a half. So for me, that's probably the play to make. Um, yeah, yeah, I just don't see it going further than that. And both these guys, yeah, they just have that ability to shut the lights out. Okay, now this will be the opening fight on the main card and will be contested between Umar Nurmagomedov and Rayoni Barcelos at bantamweight. Now, if you saw my recent breakdown of bantamweight, you'll know I'm pretty high on Umar, which will surprise some of you who know me and my utter disdain at times for some of the Dagestani talent on the roster. Now, if you look at his record and you see the name Nurmagomedov, you would immediately assume that this guy is another smothering Sambo style fighter that takes you down and either beats you up or chokes the fuck out of you. And while he certainly has that wrinkle in his game, for me, he represents the more scary breed of Dagestani fighters that have immense skill and threat on the feet as well, and that seem to be emerging a lot more. Now, Barcelos is coming in with an impressive record. He's even holding a notable win against Saeed Nurmagomedov. Admittedly, that guy is the runt of the litter, and he did that back in 2019. Since then, he's had 2 losses against Henry, first, who recently got demolished as a heavy favorite. I can't remember who that was against off the top of my head. And he also lost to Timur Valuev. And, you know, that carries no shame. He's good. But then he most recently bounced back with a win against Trevin Jones, who's not bad. Both men are similar in height, with Nurmagomedov having a 2-inch reach advantage. For me, this fight booking, to be fair, is a little bit surprising. And I think it's being booked to make Nurmagomedov make it look like he's not adding another tomato can to his shopping basket. He should be clearly punching up higher above the rankings. And I don't see this as being overly competitive. Barcelos is tough, and I think he'll get out the first round. But I'm picking Nurmagomedov, probably along with everyone else, to win this by ground and pound finish in maybe round 2. There's very little value here, but also very little risk. So if you're the type to bet big on something to gain a modest return, this fight might be the one to go for. Okay, now, this next fight on the card brings us to our compulsory women's bout. And this is between Caitlin Vieira and Raquel Pennington. There is actually another women's fight on the card that I'll throw into a parlay later, but I'm not going to break it down because one is enough for me. Now, according to the bookies, this one is being set up as a pick'em. And while I was expecting Vieira to be a favorite due to the disparity in records, looking at how both women have performed recently, I think a pick'em line actually makes a lot more sense. Now, starting with Ketlin, she is coming off 2 shocking performances against both Holly Holm, which you could have argued that she lost. I think she edged it, but it was not an impressive fight. And she also beat Misha Tate, and she was 1 fight off returning from returning from retirement. So these fights were really painful to watch, and more so for the fact that we had to endure 10 fucking rounds of it in cards where she headlined both. So, you know, I think that that did not sit well with me. Now maybe that's factoring into my decision here, but while Rocky Pennington has a rather terrible looking record, she has literally been fighting the best in the sport for over a decade, if you can call it that, if you can call them that. And she always comes in ready to scrap and have a war. So while I think this fight is going to involve a lot of clinching, and with Vieira potentially gaining some control time in stages, this makes it, again, quite a difficult pick for me. My belief is that Raquel will be busier and do more significant damage throughout the fight. However, in women's MMA, this seems to be fucking irrelevant, with laying and praying seeming to be more scoreable throughout the last year. So while I hope that the judges don't fuck this one up, I can see us all watching this fight play out. It goes to a decision with all of us certain of a Pennington win. for clearly doing the more significant work, only for Vieira to get her hand raised by split decision, securing a few takedowns at key moments. And, you can just hear the collective groans from those in attendance and the 100 people still watching at home that didn't use this fight as the toilet break of the evening. Now, mercifully, this fight is only 3 rounds. And for me, the clear play here is again a distance play where I expect this fight to go to a decision. I would avoid picking a winner at all costs here. Okay, now this is an interesting one. It's a middleweight matchup between Punahele Soriano and Roman Kopylov. Now, this one I think is a really good matchup. We've got Punahele, who's another powerful KO artist. He's had a lot of success doing that in the past, swinging for the fences, going to take your head off early. He's not the kind to just blast randomly. He does have some technique and skill. He comes out of Team Couture, so he's got some semblance of skill. And that style's worked for him to some degree. Now the issue with this weight class is that for those who kind of swing for the fences, it's very easy to gas out quickly and leave yourself nothing for the later rounds. Now, this happened to Punahele against Nick Maximov, who turned out to have a really dusty chin. So I have my concerns here. Now, I'm hoping that what he does is he comes in with more of a patient game plan, which could really throw a spanner in the works for Kopylov. Now, Kopylov is decent enough, but he tends to start his fights a lot more slowly and kind of work his way in, which would be ideal against Soriano. Certainly the Soriano we've seen in the past. He does carry a 3-inch reach advantage into this one, according to fight metrics, so that could potentially play in his favor. The issue for me with Kopylov is that he lost to Carl Roberson, and that guy is just dog shit. He's so terrible that I can't overlook it. This is another risky pick, and I'm taking a few leaps here. But I think Punahele will take a more patient approach this time and have the better moments in the fight. I think he'll cause more damage. I think he'll make it scrappy and uncomfortable. And I think he'll take a 29-28 unanimous decision win. There is a potential robbery alert on this one, though. As we all know how much these scrappy ones between two men with different styles can go. A lot of people are picking Punahele to win in round 1, and I can understand. I get the feeling it's going to go over 2.5, so go the distance, and so that might be a play to make, possibly. All right, now we're finally at the co-main event, which is a bout between Dan 50K Ige and Damon Jackson. Now, starting with Damon Jackson, he is coming off a streak where he had 6 wins in his last 7, with his only loss coming against Ilya Topuria, and we know what an absolute savage he is. It was his most recent bout against Pat Sabatini, a fight which he took really convincingly, and if I remember correctly, I think he lost his brother either the day before or a few days before that fight, if I remember that right. Now, not only was it surprising for that reason, but the fact that he took the fight in those circumstances and the fact that he won. It was more the way he won. I mean, this fight was over in 60 seconds, and Sabatini is really good. Jackson has fought decent competition outside of Sabatini, and what I've noticed is that fight by fight, he seems to be gradually improving. And, I think there's a strong chance here that he takes Ige down, who's significantly smaller, and just simply smothers him out. I will say that Ige's stand-up should be far superior, in my opinion. And this is where it could pose a really big problem for Jackson, certainly early on. Now, the thing is, on paper, things are looking really bad for Ige. He's coming off a loss in 4 of the last 5, albeit against really high-level competition. So he fought Evloev, and he fought the Korean Zombie, and both of them absolutely dominated him. Josh Emmett also handled him pretty well as well. I don't remember too much about that fight, but I remember it being, it wasn't very controversial. Now, the thing is, though, Ige has shown an ability to scramble really well, and he has really good cardio. and he's going to need every bit of both against Jackson. Um, Again, not to sound like a broken record here, but this is a really horrible one to call, and I'd be lying if I said I had full confidence. The records do look horrendously mismatched, certainly on form and according to the eye test. But it is important to note that Ige has fought much better competition. So, my pick, given the size disparity between the two men and my feeling that this fight will go the distance, I'm going to edge over Jackson here, who is a decent underdog according to Vegas here. I think it will be a razor close split decision. So if you take this one, you're going to be sitting on your hands. But I think Jackson will edge it out with control time. I can see him getting dropped in a round and maybe winning the other two. It's a risky play, but the odds are close for a reason. And the thing is, I just can't trust Ige due to the manner in which he's been beaten up in some of his last few fights. So I just can't trust him anymore. Now, okay, this is where it gets strange. Now, some of you might be aware that this fight card was originally supposed to be Imamov and Kelvin Gastelum in the main event. Now, we've just recently found out that Gastelum has had to withdraw as a result of an injury. So, and by the way, I was picking Imamov to win that fight and quite comfortably. However, we know that Gastelum's now pulled out and that he will be actually fighting at light heavyweight against Sean Strickland. Now, both men naturally fight at middleweight. So this makes a prediction on this one all the more challenging. So looking at Imavov first, he's coming off against wins against Buckley, who just got absolutely murked by Chris Curtis. He beat Edmund Shabazian, who was a really good prospect coming up. I think he went 10-0 to start off with, and then just started getting fucked up. I think he lost to Brunson. He has bounced back with a win recently. But for me, this win is, it's kind of meh. And he also beat Ian Heinisch, who had lost 3 of his 4 going into that fight. So Imamov, in those bouts, has showed really good, crisp boxing. And despite the fact that I don't rate his opponents as elite, he did what he was sent in there to do, and that's all you can really ask. Now, the red flag for me is he did lose to Phil Hawes, and that is a really horrible win. Phil Hawes is terribly inconsistent. There is part of me that wants to take it as a bit of an anomaly and just say he had a bad night at the office, but that's a worry to me. Imamov is a big guy. He has good length. He has a really respectable chin. He's shown he can take a shot, and he's shown he can face a little adversity in fights and battle through. Now, on the other side, Sean Strickland is coming off 2 losses. The first was against new champ, bit of a slip of the tongue there. New champ Alex Pereira, who pretty much sent Strickland to hell. And then he came off a decision loss, a split against Jared Cannonier. Now that one kind of verged on a robbery for me. I thought Strickland clearly won that fight. Now the main issue that I have with Strickland is, despite how entertaining he is, the guy is clearly mentally retarded. And it's part of what I love about him. I mainly say this because despite being renowned for being the go-to guy to train in wrestling with amongst the MMA community, we never get to see those apparently high-level skills, and he has a really bad tendency to throw game plans out the window and just get into a boxing match. I also think he's taken this fight a little quicker to try and avenge the loss he doesn't think he should have had against Cannonier. And I think that could really explode in his face, especially as Imavov is coming off a full camp, because he was pretty much training to fight against Gastelum. And I get the impression that Strickland is probably fresh off the couch for this one. So, tricky. Despite this, I'm going to go against my better judgment here, and I'm going to take Strickland to win by decision. Either way, I hope we get a press conference with Strickland, as he's always golden nose. The guy's just wild. So, anyway, due to the circumstances, I think this is a really risky one. Obviously, they're fighting at light heavyweight. But, you didn't come here for wisdom. You came here for bad MMA math. So, What can I say? Right, so before I sign off, as promised, I'm going to chuck up a few parlays. One, a little safe, and the other, throwing caution to the wind, just to cover both types of gambler here. Now, if you're looking for safe money, I didn't mention some of these, so bear with me. I've noted down, I'd go with Alan Nascimento on the money line. I think he's a safe shout. I like Rebecca to give Fiora a nice early nap. And I like Claudio Ribeiro and Al Hassan to go under 1.5. I also like Umar to potentially go over 1.5. Now, I did say I expect Umar to get a finish in the second, but I think it's an interesting shout because Barcelos is tough and the money line is wide. And I think for that reason, a lot of people are going to be gambling on Umar to finish it early, and he doesn't really finish fights that quickly usually. So that could be an interesting one to throw in. I'd also expect Vieira and Pennington to go the distance. I'm not sure off the top of my head what the odds are for that one, but I imagine they'd be at a sort of 3-1, 2-1, and could be a good part of a parlay. Now, for the wild motherfuckers in attendance that like to go big or go home, Priscilla Cacuera is a good shout as a hefty underdog. She's facing Sijara Eubanks, who is old and shit. And I think the betting line on that one is crazy. So you could bet, you don't have to really bet too heavy on Priscilla to get a decent return there. Either Al Hassan or Ribeiro to win by TKO because they're evens would be quite nice part of a parlay, whichever one you want to go with there. Vieira is actually very decent at even money, and I think it will be a contentious decision, but I think she'll get it done. And Damon Jackson as an underdog looks like a decent play as well. Now, tune in on Sunday afternoon again, where I'll do a card reaction. And also keep a lookout for my video on lightweight, which should be dropping sometime tomorrow. Try not to bet the house on this one though, boys. This card is a death trap. Anyway, in a bit.